Hello, and welcome to the channel. Welcome back. Look, I brought you a guest. Hi. This is a very good friend of mine, John Watts. I'm going to give you a little background on John. John is the president of Independence Games. He lives in Georgia with his wonderful wife, Wendy. Wonderful. I'm sure we get that in there. Kind of help you out, man. John's been involved in gaming since the early 80s. He became enamored with such RPGs as Traveler, which I loved, Star Frontiers, which I loved, James Bond, which I loved, and Shadowrun, which I have a Shadowrun story, but that's for another day. I do like Shadowrun. I enjoyed it a lot. In 2011, John started Independence Games and originated the Clement sector setting for the Traveler role-playing game, which is excellent, by the way, and a lot of fun. And he's written several source books and adventures in the setting. In 2016, John took the Clement sector and made it into a freestanding game. He's since expanded the setting into Earth sector, and most recently, he went deep into the history of the setting, which I think is so cool, with the Wild West game Rider, which, Wild West is kind of my thing. So, Independence game products can be purchased in print or in PDF from DriveThruRPG, or in PDF from their web store at independencegames.com. I'm going to put up links in the description of the video for all kinds of good stuff and ways you can get in touch with John, which I highly recommend. He's a wonderful guy, and he's being very kind to share his time tonight to talk about our favorite new thing, the OGL 1.1. The other night when I put up a video, John and I chatted just briefly about it, and I did not realize the scope of this thing and how many independent game companies and independent creators it could really harm. So I wanted to get a little bit of an update on John on how this is affecting Independence Games and the folks that he works with and how they're dealing with it, and get his take on it, and just kind of see what the future is going to hold. So, John, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, hey, no problem.
Well, let's get started. What was kind of your immediate reaction when you read this thing?
Well, when I first heard about it, I just sort of assumed that they were just going to kind of close up D&D 6th edition, D&D 1, whatever they want to call it this week. And I just sort of assumed it would close that up, and that would affect, anybody who wanted to use that particular version of the rules, and that everything else would stay the same. Because for a very, very long time, we've had the idea that the open game license was, in fact, perpetual, which we all took to mean could not be, it would continue on. What perpetual means to us normal folk. Yes. But apparently to lawyers, that doesn't mean what we thought it meant.
It means perpetual until it doesn't. Basically, it's all
exactly. Yeah. So it's not really perpetual, I guess. But at any rate, it would seem that in fact you can, or at least they seem to believe that they can, go back and revoke these things. And I don't believe that's something they should be able to do. It certainly doesn't seem to be the intent of what they were doing to begin with, but that seems to be the tack they're taking, at least if the leaked version of this is in fact true, which maybe it is, maybe it isn't.
There is, one of the things I kind of floated in one of the videos I did was that maybe this is like a negotiating tactic. This is the worst case scenario. They let that out, so now they have some wiggle room to negotiate. But one of the things and I've really been thinking about this a lot the last few days, and a lot of folks probably watching this may not have even been born at the time, but second edition D&D really kind of was floundering. It had lost a lot of market share to White Wolf Games and World of Darkness, which had a totally different kind of an attitude about gaming and sort of was changing up the gaming market. And they really came to the gaming community, D&D, Wizards, with hat in hand, and we're kind of like, here's our third edition game. We've worked really hard on it. It's a big change from second edition, and we really want you to be enthusiastic about it, and we really want your support. And that's the original kind of impetus for the original open gaming license. And it worked. It worked fabulously. I mean, it created a whole secondary industry, a whole third party content market that has thrived for 20 years. And this really does seem to be, a lot of this seems to be greed. A lot of this is just, they want a piece of what Paizo's got. They want a piece of what the folks at Critical Role has. I mean, the last thing I saw on it was a lawyer, former lawyer, talking about it, and she was saying that they're even wanting, if you do anything that monetizes what you're creating and it has any connection to D&D, they want. So if you play D&D on your Patreon, I had a D&D game on my Patreon for a while. They want a piece of that. I mean, within theory. I mean, I don't think they're going to go after somebody who has 20 people on a Patreon unless they're making a lot of money. I mean, it's going to be, but they could. That's the thing, is there's nothing to stop them. And the way I understand it is this thing kicks in on the 13th. That's what it sounds like. And so if you have a company, like you've had a company for years, you've got a lot of irons in the fire, and this is going to completely change. Well, actually, I'm kind of getting a little bit ahead of myself. How does OGL, which is kind of related to D&D, how does that relate to your business?
Well, for me, I'm in somewhat of an odd position. I'm not in kind of the same position that a lot of folks are, because what I'm doing is actually operating with the OGL, but I'm operating off the Traveler SRD. Now, the Traveler SRD was put out by Mark Miller and Mongoose Publishing, and I believe that it's owned basically by Mongoose Publishing at this stage. Mark is still very influential in the Traveler world, and he still owns Traveler. But as far as the actual SRD goes, it's taken from Mongoose's first edition, and so therefore I think they're the ones who have the control over it. So essentially where we are is that I'll run the clock back a little, back to 2016. In 2016, we had been attached to Traveler through what was called the Traveler logo license at the time, which allowed us to use the OGL to use the Traveler SRD. And we were able actually to put Traveler at the bottom of the books. And, we were able to kind of interact in that world. And then in 2015, 2016, Mongoose decided they wanted to come out with a second edition that was not going to be OGL. And so they were trying to get us into a program, without going into a whole lot of detail, that it just was not going to help us at all. And so a lot of those third-party publishers basically went out and basically used the SRD and other things to basically form what we call Cepheus Engine, and that's what Clement Sector and Earth Sector and Rider are all based on, and they work with that. And so essentially the OGL was our protection to, maintain that whole little, I don't know, biosphere really. And with the idea that it couldn't be rescinded, it couldn't go away. And so therefore, opinions differ as to how Mongoose really feels about this, but whether or not they wish to, get rid of us, they really couldn't, because of the Traveler SRD was, something that couldn't be rescinded. It couldn't be done because it was in fact perpetual. And so now we have WOTC coming along and saying, hey, perpetual means until we don't want it to happen anymore. And so, and we're going to deauthorize this. Well, if that's set as a precedent, then of course, anybody who wants to, has possession of the Traveler SRD could then come along and do the exact same thing and say, hey, we're rescinding it. And pretty much for us, the ones who have been building off this for years, that's the equivalent of taking your arm and wiping the chessboard. I mean, they could certainly be rid of us in no time flat if that's really what they want to do. Now, I have been of the opinion that is in fact what they've wanted to do. But others are telling me that's not. And hey, I'd love to be wrong. Thanks very much. That would be awesome. But, it does put us in an odd position because we really don't know what to do. Um, whereas other D&D publishers, people who are working from the D&D SRD, who are doing these things, who are in all of these different, tons and tons of different programs and so forth, that are they're just, it's a big, huge mess. And for me, when you were doing my bio earlier, you were talking about the James Bond 007 game. That's actually my favorite game of all time. I absolutely love that system. And I wanted to try to do something with it, and someone had created a clone of it, classified. And so through the OGL, we were able to take that and move forward with it. And of course, that's now in danger because of that, because the OGL is not there anymore, and because some of those things came from things like D&D Modern, that becomes a problem. And so a lot of, if nothing else, it's very likely that I'm going to have to take the 100 plus books that I have, and if nothing else, change the legal text. Whereas a lot, and I might be able to just change the legal text, and that may be all I have to change, or I may have to start from scratch. Which, geez,
Which I mean, and this is not like, they're not saying like, hey, next year when we launch D&D, this is happening. They're saying this is now. This is in, well, the end of this week, basically. Friday the 13th, which I think is very apt as well. But what do you think about, and again, this, just to reiterate, we are both discussing what has been leaked. I think to Gizmodo was the folks who got it first.
Yeah.
And but I've heard nothing from WOTC or any other source that would indicate that they are denying any of this. I think it's pretty much a done deal. It sounds like this is what they want to do. One of the things they're talking about in there is, if you are, it's going to cancel the OGL 1.0 immediately, and you basically have like the option of like ceasing and desisting or signing on to the OGL 1.1, which one of the clauses in the 1.1 that's been leaked is they own any of your D&D stuff that you produced. If you beat your brains against the wall writing a manuscript, writing a book, or an adventure module, or some kind of a supplemental thing that you did under the original open game license, they have the option. And again, I think that a company like WOTC is not going to do this a lot, but I can see this is a really great way of getting rid of Paizo. There's a great way of shooting down their major competitor, the one that basically, when they fumbled with 4th edition, Paizo was right there, and Paizo was able to really get Pathfinder going for real because of the OGL. And so, do you think they're overreaching on this? And what do you think this is going to do to the market for folks who do kind of like third party? Do you think this is going to help D&D, help WOTC, or do you think it's going to ultimately hurt them?
I think in the end it hurts them. I think it's going to hurt them a lot. And one of the reasons I think it's going to hurt them is because, well, if nothing else, this is going to give birth to a lot of other people who do other systems. There are going to be other systems which come along now, and they're essentially creating competitors by doing this, and that's nuts.
It's the opposite of what they originally did this thing for.
Right. Yeah, because I mean, I think they're planning, and this is just me guessing, but I think their planning was that they would come out with 1.1 and put it out there that, we're going to take so much of your Kickstarter money, we're going to take so much of your YouTube monetization, we're going to take so much of this, that, and the other, and we're gonna have access to your IP, we're going to make you report to us how much you're making, all these different things. I think they just thought you'd just be trapped in that and you wouldn't go anywhere. And I think that's the reason they're going to have to get rid of 1.0, because, well, I mean, why on earth would you sign on to 1.1 if you could just stay with 1.0 and avoid all that crap?
Yeah.
And so, I think what they're going to do is just, completely start over, start a lot of competitors for themselves. One of the things I've been talking about with a lot of people online is that, I was involved in the electrical supply business before this, and I was involved with sports announcing before this. And so I did a lot of work in other businesses, and I can tell you that one of the things you really want with a business is you want things not to change. And because the money flow continues in, and you continue to, as my wife would say, ride the cash cow while it's walking. And to me, this is just coming up with change for change's sake, or in a big giant money grab. Oh, quick, let's all grab the money. And it's just going to slip past them. I think it's nuts. I mean, one of the reasons, what we do for this with the Cepheus engine, what myself, there's Zoser, there's there's Stella Gamma, and just a ton, Moon Toad, a bunch of different guys who are doing the Cepheus engine. And I mean, had Mongoose not, tried to monetize us in a very similar manner to what's going on here, we'd be Mongoose third-party publishers, and we probably would have signed on to a deal somewhere along the line to, pass some money back and forth with them. And even if not, we were bringing people into the Traveler biosphere.
Absolutely.
And, and now it just seems like, it pretty much, by doing that, they invented about 6 competitors. And I really think that's what WOTC's doing here. I think instead of killing Paizo, which is what I really think this is all about, I think they've probably gotten Paizo to start a new game system, and I think they're probably going to get about 6 other people to do it.
And me personally, I ran Pathfinder version 1 for years. I didn't hate 4th edition D&D, but I think it would have done much better if they maybe had called it something else, because it didn't feel like D&D. And it gave Paizo the opening they needed. And for a while, they were just, eating WotC's lunch. I think they overextended and got a little greedy and started putting out way too much stuff, way too much product. And it also got a little crunchier than a lot of folks felt comfortable with. And along comes 5e, and 5e is, they simplified the system a great deal. Don't get me wrong, I love the 5th edition of D&D. I think it's a really good version. It's actually I think it's probably my favorite version to date, because it has a lot of role-playing hooks and stuff in it. So it gives you more opportunities to build your character and kind of play more role-playing aspects of the game. And that's something that appeals to me a lot. And I think 5e is a good version, but and if you look at what Paizo turned around and did, their 2nd edition of Pathfinder is much simpler. And I have actually seen quite a few. Actually, I have a fellow who we're friends on Twitter, and I had made some disparaging comments about Pathfinder, and he was like, "Well, what version are you talking about?" And I said, "Well, 1.0 is the only version I've played. I haven't played 2." So he's going to come on and give me a little, because he writes for Paizo. I think he's a third-party content person, but he's done some stuff for Paizo for 2nd edition, and he is a big proponent for it. I think this is probably going to drive people, because I know Paizo has not been doing as great as they had been doing, and I think this is probably going to tip things back. And for a lot of folks, they're gonna head back to Paizo. I think this is going to help Shane Hensley and Savage Worlds quite a bit, because that's a good, solid, well represented system. He has a licensing thing in place for folks to do third-party stuff for Savage Worlds. He's a nice guy, and I will enjoy that system a lot. But it's almost like cutting off your nose to spite your face, and it's what it feels like they're doing. And I guess we'll see kind of what happens at the end of the week. What comes of it. Are you guys, is Independence, are you guys kind of ready come what may? You ready to deal with what you're going to have to deal with?
We have plans. We've got a lot of, we've got a lot drawn up. We've got a lot in place to happen, and try to weather the storm. We're not going away. We're
Glad to hear
if absolutely nothing else, we'll start over with Clement Sector for Savage Worlds, and or something like this. I mean, we'll definitely have something out there. I was joking with somebody the other day that really I've been talking about writing a detective novel. Maybe now's the time, but the real
I would love to read that. I'm a big fan. I've enjoyed all your supplements that I've seen. I've really liked them. I like your take on Traveler. I enjoy it a great deal more than the Imperium and kind of the standard traditional setting. And I'll be honest, I really enjoyed Mongoose's iteration of Traveler quite a bit. To be honest, more so than the current, the iteration that Miller, is it Miller or
Miller, yeah.
That Miller put out. I mean, I know the guy invented the game, so I mean, he clearly knows what he's doing. But I did enjoy the Mongoose version. It seemed a lot more accessible, and I see that in a lot of the stuff that you've been doing with Clement. Is it it's still really good science fiction. It's got a lot of cool stuff in it. It just is a little more accessible than the kind of the traditional world that they built. So I'm glad to hear that this is maybe a bump in the road, but it's not the end of the world. So that's wonderful to hear. And have you talked to any other? And I don't want you to drop names or anything, but have you talked to other folks who are in the business who are maybe not as enthusiastic about what's coming next?
Well, for the most part, the other Cepheus publishers and I mean, we've basically, kind of quickly formed a Facebook Messenger group, and we're, kind of going back and forth with, how exactly are we going to handle this, and what are we going to do, and so forth and so on. And so, like I said, we've got plans, we've got ideas, and I think we're going to weather it. I think we'll move forward. It's just really tough because, like you were saying a minute ago, it's not like you've got 6 months to do this, and in fact, if this leak is to be believed, they had planned to just drop this on Friday without telling anybody.
Yeah.
And just go, hey, boom, you're, deal with it.
That's one of the reasons I'm thinking it's either they did it intentionally, leaked it intentionally, because that's kind of a popular thing to do, is to see the response and kind of gauge the response, or somebody in WOTC was just like, this is wrong, or I can't believe they're doing all this, and God bless them, whoever it was, because they, like you said, I think they would have just slid this right in on the Friday the 13th and have been like, surprise, and that would have been a mess.
And wow, Friday the 13th, right? So I guess that makes all of us the Templars, right? So do I need to hide my books on Oak Island? That's what I want to know.
Book a ticket for Scotland. Get to Scotland quick. John, I'm gonna probably wrap us up here. Okay, if the folks and my massive audience of a few hundred people, which I'm growing, I'm trying to grow it. I've actually this last few months, I've picked up a lot of new folks, and I am a shameless capitalist, and this is my intention is to monetize the hell out of this if I can. If folks want to help Independence Games, and if they're interested in finding out more about you, I'm going to put a link to your site. Is there any other places they can go? Anything that you've got coming out right now, or that came out recently, that you'd like to kind of let them know about?
Well, over the last few months, we've been updating everything from 2nd edition Clement Sector to 3rd edition Clement Sector. And so we've got the big, giant, massive 675 page 3rd edition Clement Sector book. So you can grab that in print at drive-thru, or you can get it on PDF from us at independencerpgs.com, or you can get it from drive-thru RPG. And of course, we've been going back and getting everything, picking it up. But of course, most of the 2nd edition stuff is going to be compatible with the 3rd edition stuff. And we've got hundreds of things out there. We got books on starships. We got books on cops that are coming theoretically. We've got, criminal, a book on criminals, a book on bounty hunters. We've got all kinds of stuff. And of course, you were alluding to Ryder. We've got the Western book out there. We've got New Liberty, which is the town that we were kind of planning on putting campaigns in, and hopefully still will be. We just recently did a book on famous characters of the Old West. So basically historical folks with their character sheets and a whole nice big thing. And that was fun to research into. So
I'm working on my fifth
uh,
Golgotha book right now, and I'll have to go chase that down and grab it because I I'm always looking for new historical folks to kind of slide into one of the books, and uh, that sounds like a lot of fun. So and it's set in the same universe as Clement, right? It's the same.
That's right. Yeah. Whereas
That's really cool.
it is, yeah. There's actually several references back and forth between each other, which is kind of weird, really, with it being an Old West book. But there's actually a little bit at the beginning of New Liberty, which explains that the town, is a fiction. In our world, is a fictional town in Wyoming. But to the Clement sector folks, it's not only a real town, but it's also the subject of a long-running television show that was running in the 70s. And as well as then was given a reboot in the 2000s, and then is now a holographic show you can watch from Harbinger Productions in Clement sector. Go to
That's
your local
awesome.
B-class starport and pick one up.
That is awesome. Now you need to do the Clement spy game. Do your
Yes.
Bond game. Do your like modern adventure game. What is this? I just got a thing popping up on my screen here. Yikes. All right. Well, they're telling me that I'm almost out of meeting time for my cheap free Zoom. And John, you hitched your wagon to a star here because I am really, really just I put the boom in boomer. But I'm gonna wrap this up. Please, we'll be in touch and find out how things go on Friday. I highly recommend you folks check out John's stuff. His company is amazing. He does really good stuff. If you're into science fiction and now Old West stuff, we need to have the Golgotha Old West crossover thing. You need to have
that's a good idea.
There's some weird have some aliens come visit Earth, like back pre jump drive, and but we could have some fun with that. But anyways, folks, John, thank you for coming on here and kind of giving us the temperature of the industry right now, because you are the person I know best in that business, and it really does it does my heart good to see that you're like, we're ready for this, whatever's coming, we'll roll with it. And that's, and it is not like D&D is the end all be all of role playing. It certainly was a jumping off point for it, but so many people have created unique systems and worlds and everything else. And if WOTC is really just dead set on doing this, I think you're right. I think it's going to be to their detriment. I think they'll have a pretty shiny little virtual tabletop thing, and they'll sell dice skins and character pictures. And, if you really want that +3 sword of sharpness in your character's inventory, it sounds like it's going to be like a video game. And I lot, the thing I love about tabletop is sitting around a table with real flesh and blood people and playing.
Well, if you'd like that +3 fiery sword, just send us $9.99 and we'll add it.
Exactly. And your referee is like, where did you get that? Oh, I got it official. Here's my little official certificate from Wizards. No, that's I think I don't think they're thinking this through. The folks who are execs at Hasbro and at WOTC are both from Microsoft and from their gaming division. So they're thinking they can monetize this thing just like a video game, and they don't know gamers. I don't think they know what they have unleashed. So, but John Watts, thank you so much. And just to show you how completely technologically incompetent I am, I'm going to stop recording, and it's probably going to just close the whole thing down. So, and you guys get to watch me do this. I got a message the other day. People say they can see my eyes when I'm looking for the button to push. Yeah, hey, I've got a young man who knows all this stuff, who wants to start helping me like produce the shows and stuff like that, and I'm going to take him up on it because I need the help.
Well, one more thing.
Yes,
Tell John happy birthday.
I will. I will. I took him out to sushi. He ate a whole bunch of sushi. Um, he got a little Captain Picard action figure, and
Nice.
well, see, for years, my son told me that that he didn't like Star Trek. He every time I would mention it, he'd roll his eyes and be like, "Oh yeah." And then his girlfriend kind of outed him, and she was like, "He watches Star Trek every single day." So it did my heart good. It really did. It's like, I understand. Your kid has to be rebellious and be like,
Sure.
yeah, I don't like what you like, Dad. That's old stuff. But he does. New Year's Day, he came over and we got some Chinese food and we watched Star Trek, and it
Awesome.
was it was great. So he had a great birthday. I can't believe he's as old as he is,
Yeah.
because it's like you blink and they're old. But yeah, I will tell you guys the story someday of maybe we'll get John back on here to tell it, of how my son had a somewhat unconventional solution to
Yes, yes. He
a
called himself
problem in a game.
He called himself Captain Awesome, and I most often refer to him as Captain
Captain
Awesome and not
Awesome.
John Belcher. So there's that.
I found the traveler dice you gave him, and I found the one of the cool things is in travelers you have a social standing that if it's a certain level you have a title, like an imperial title, and he basically had like a little credit card,
Mhm.
a traveler credit card that gave him like a knighthood or something.
Yep.
So yeah, my son just did something horrible in John's game, and it was beautiful. I was very proud,
We loved every minute of it.
Oh yeah, I mean, and I always picture Captain Awesome as kind of like Captain Stern from Heavy Metal. I mean, like the
Exactly.
epaulets and the other things, and basically, don't worry, Charlie, I got an angle. So, so that's my son, Captain Awesome. I will tell Captain Awesome happy birthday,
Please
and
do.
he asked about you often. Hopefully, we can get you guys together at a convention sometime, and he can wreck some
Cool.
other game, some other scenario. Uh, folks, thank you so much for being so kind and patient. And John, thank you for your time. If I disappear here, I'll message you in a second, and
Cool.
let's see what happens when I do this. But thank you so much. Please like the channel, share the video if you enjoyed this, share it with your friends, share it with your enemies, put it on a bus station wall, just whatever. Check out all the good stuff that Independence Games has. And John is all over social media. You can find him there, and I highly recommend you do. And thank you guys so much. We'll see you on the next video. Bye. Thanks, John.
No problem.
All right, let's see if this works.